Hey everyone, this is Jack Allwell with another Money episode. Today we have very special guest Bob Burg. For over 30 years, Bob Burg has been successfully showing entrepreneurs, leaders, and sales professionals how to communicate their value and accelerate their business growth. Although for years he was best known for his sales classic, Endless Referrals, it's his business parable, The Go-Giver, co-authored with John David Mann, that has created a worldwide movement. While part of a 4-book series, The Go-Giver itself has sold more than 1 million copies and been translated into 30 languages. It was rated number 10 on Inc. magazine's list of the most motivational books ever written and was on HubSpot's 20 most highly rated sales books of all time. Bob is founder of the Go-Giver Success Alliance, an online mentorship community for successful entrepreneurs, leaders, and sales professionals, and he publishes the very popular Daily Impact email. He's an advocate, supporter, and defender of the free enterprise system, believing that the amount of money one makes is directly proportional to how many people they serve. He's an unapologetic animal fanatic and served on the board of directors of Furry Friends Adoption and Clinic in his town of Jupiter, Florida. Bob, welcome to the show. It is great to have you on.
Thank you, Jack. Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So I mean, it's really wild that I have you on the show. I mean, I really want to thoroughly thank you for coming on. And the Go-Giver absolutely changed my mindset in how I think about providing value for others and being open to receiving from others.
Thank you.
And before we get into the 5 laws of stratospheric success that you bring up in the Go-Giver and the Go-Giver way, we like to get a feeling of where you were coming from and what your relationship with money was like growing up.
Very fortunate to have had, 2 fantastic parents who had a great marriage. With money, my parents both grew up poor, but my dad especially, who grew up in that real kind of immigrant kind of slum type of situation. So I think my mom was probably always more comfortable with money. With dad, there may have been a little bit of a lack mentality in his own mind, but he was very generous in terms of how he was with his family, with his kids, and with others. And in our home, people were always made to feel welcome. And I never in my mind had any kind of negative feelings about money. How a lot of times you grow up and when the parents have a lack mentality, it's there was never anything like that. So I was very, very fortunate, and my parents actually did fairly well. They were entrepreneurs, and so as far as I knew, we never lacked. I think we probably did maybe a little more than I thought we did, but how parents are, where they don't let the kids necessarily know that. So no, I think it was very healthy in that way. I think any challenges or issues I had with money personally was more within myself and my own feelings of unworthiness that were for reasons other than directly related to money or directly related to family or anything. It was my own issues that I had. And I think when you don't feel necessarily good about yourself, you tend to also push away those things that, you're not as receptive as you might otherwise be. Once I got past that opened up a whole new world in that regard.
So I think a lot of people struggle with being receptive to input and getting help from others. How did you get over that? And that was that feeling of, I guess, like kind of lacking in your own self, kind of what drove you to writing this book?
No, I think I had grown before that into kind of getting past that aspect in my life. I think in the writing of the book with John, we had both in our own lives been able to get, to a point where receptivity was something we were both very comfortable with. We had discussions about that and so forth. But no, it was something I definitely had to learn. And I'd say it was about when I was maybe about 30, well, that was a little before that maybe, but I'd say between 30 and 35 is when I started to really read and study and learn and grow. One book that made a big difference for me was Cybernetics by Dr. Maxwell Malz that was published in 1960. And that was the first book I read that taught me that we all see the world from our own set of beliefs, beliefs about how the world works, what some people call your paradigm. I now call it our unconscious belief system.
Okay.
And it's just how we see the world and our part in that world and what the world is supposed to be. And I think I saw myself as not necessarily being a prosperous person, and once I could recognize that and knew it was an issue, now I was in a position to be able to do the work it took to get past that. But I think like anything else, until we know there's an issue, we're really powerless to do anything about it.
Interesting.
Yeah. And
So,
then,
so you mentioned the Cybernetics. Were there any other books or resources in particular that you really felt, I guess, changed your identity or helped you move forward?
oh, well, many. I mean, everything from, Think and Grow Rich to the magic of thinking big to, there's all sorts of The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace, written in 1910, The Richest Man in Babylon. I mean, there's all sorts of wonderful, fantastic books out there and teachings. It was just that psycho-cybernetics is where I first kind of learned it was a thing.
Okay.
It was me, and it was how I saw the world and what I saw as my place in it, and why I allowed things to get in my way and why I pushed prosperity away, and so forth. And it was once I understood that, now I could work on it.
So that's cool that you mentioned Richest Man in Babylon, because I kind of view your book kind of like that storytelling. Like sometimes it's easier to learn through stories than just telling them, go do this, go do that. So why don't we go through, if you could just give brief intro to the book and perhaps run down the 5 laws of stratospheric success.
Yeah, so the book, and it was written co-authored with John David Mann, who's a brilliant writer. I'm much more of a how-to person by nature, so it was really a collaboration. I could never have turned this into the story that John did. I mean, he's amazing. And so it's a business parable, and it's about a guy named Joe who's kind of a young, up and a good guy, but very, he's aggressive and he's ambitious, but he's really focused on himself, and he's not understanding. He's very frustrated that he doesn't seem to have that he hasn't reached the level of success he feels he deserves. And he meets a mentor by the name of Pindar, who introduces him to some others as well. And what Joe comes to realize is that shifting your focus, and I think this is really the key, shifting your focus from getting to giving. Now, when we say giving in this context, we simply mean constantly and consistently providing immense value to others, understanding that doing so is not only a more fulfilling way of conducting business, it's actually the most financially profitable way as well. And not for any kind of, way out there, woo-woo, magical, mystical reasons. Oh, just give and good things. No, not at all. It actually ties very much into human nature. It's very logical. It's very rational. When you're that person who can take your focus off yourself and place it on serving others, on discovering their needs, their wants, their desires, when you can move the focus off of yourself and make it about solving other people's challenges and helping move others closer to happiness, people feel good about you. They feel great about you, right? They want to get to know you. They like you. They trust you. They want to be in relationship with you. They want to do business with you. They want to be your personal walking ambassador. And so, that's really the premise of the whole thing. And there are five laws. There are the laws of value, compensation, influence, authenticity, and receptivity. And it's the combination of all 5 of those laws, not 1, 2, 3, or even 4 of them, but all 5 that, is basically, if they are followed, you cannot help but being successful where you want to be.
Mhm. So I know we don't want to be focusing on ourselves, but I'm sure a lot of people, I mean, we're going through an inflationary environment. Many people's wages aren't going up as much as their living expenses are growing. So let's say a listener is thinking, I'm providing crazy value. So I feel like I'm doing my part, but I'm not getting compensated accordingly. What would you say to that person, and how could we use that like go-giver mindset to go into a salary negotiation?
Well, okay, so this is such a good question. So let's look at this on two different sort of levels, or in two different situations. One thing I always tell my listeners whenever I'm speaking at a conference, at a sales conference, okay, and there's a room full of salespeople there, right? One of the first things I'll say is nobody's going to buy from you because you have a quota to meet. Okay, they're not going to buy from you because you need the money, would like to see the sale happen, or even just because you're a really nice person. They're going to buy from you. They're going to do business with you only because they believe that they will be better off by doing so than by not doing so. And that's the only reason, again, that's human nature. And it's the only reason why anyone should do business with you or me or anyone else. By the same token, if you're working for a company, your employer is not going to hire you and keep you on and keep paying you a salary or give you a raise because you have a mortgage payment to meet, or because you want to send your kid to a certain school, or because you want to go out to eat more than you do, or for any other reason other than they believe that the value you bring to the company is worth it to them to continue to pay you. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. That's to be expected. That is how it is. So if we're saying, gee, I'm giving all this value, but nothing's happening, nothing's coming back to me. Well, the first thing we then need to do is look at how we are providing value, because what does that even mean? Well, value can be defined as the relative worth or desirability of a thing, of something, to the end user or beholder. In other words, what is it about this thing, this product, service, concept, idea, the work you're putting in, your skills, your, what have you? What is it about that brings, has so much worth, or again, value to that other person, that they will either exchange their money for that, they will pay you, so they will give you a raise, whatever. So in other words, the key thought is value is always in the eyes of the beholder. Right. So you may believe you're adding all this amazing value, but is it value as they see it, as they understand it, as being of value? Are you communicating that value correctly? Do they know it's of value? If it's something that is, again, I don't know. I'm not the person, so I couldn't say. But these are all things we have to keep in mind. If your value is such that it's worth it for them to give you a raise rather than taking a chance of losing you, then you're probably going to get a raise. And on the other hand, sometimes the market is such that you need to stay where you are for a while, even without that raise, while you're looking for something else, if not getting that raise is a reason for you finding employment elsewhere. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not saying to someone, quit your job because they're not giving you a raise. No, saying first, find out what can you do, what kind of value you can provide. How is that going to be seen as value to the people who met the beholder in this case, right? The eyes of the beholder, so that you are in a position to get that raise. And then if regardless of whatever happens, you see that it's just not going to have that, you're not going to get that raise. Well, now you have a decision to make. And again, that's a market-based decision, like anything else we're buying and selling, because here we're buying and selling our time, energy, wisdom, knowledge, work, and so forth.
Interesting. Awesome advice. So I guess I'd like to touch a little bit on the law of receptivity also. I guess, why do you think it's so easy for some people to be open to receiving from others, and yet it's so incredibly hard for others? Is it simply as like our egos are very fragile to ask for help in certain cases? Like, what do you think that stems from?
Well, it could be that, but I think generally it's the way the world, it's the messages that the world gives us about money, prosperity, abundance, business. We live in a very anti-prosperity world. The messages that we get, because when you think about it, there is enough, for everyone to thrive, and yet the messages are, oh, there's not enough, and so forth. You got to take from this person to forcibly give to that. Otherwise, no, and it's just not true. Now, the law of receptivity says the key to effective giving is to stay open to receiving. Well, this really means understanding that, yeah, we breathe out. Well, we also have to breathe in. It's not one or the other. We breathe out carbon dioxide. We breathe in oxygen. We breathe out, which is giving. We breathe in, which is receiving. Giving and receiving are not opposite concepts. Giving and receiving are simply two sides of the very same coin, and they work best in tandem. But when the messages that we get from the world around us from the time we're little kids, and all we see and hear is that, is about lack and about, look at the messages you hear these days, how millionaires or billionaires shouldn't be allowed to exist. Oh my gosh, what a horrible message that is, not to mention a total lack of understanding of economics in any way. But how it is, people with the strongest opinions usually know the least about the topic, so what have you. But my good friend of mine, Randy Gage, is just a great teacher on prosperity. He does this fantastic vignette about how if you notice any big selling movie, right, any popular movie, typically there are two types of people that are portrayed. There are the good people who are typically struggling, right? They're poor, they're honest, but they're always poor, but they're happy, right? They're poor, but they're happy, right? But these people are always stepped on, stepped over, stepped around, pushed down, pushed over by who? The evil rich people, who are always mean and nasty and cowardly, and all they want is money. And not only do they want money, but they want to hurt other people. And those are the messages. And you see those in just about every movie. He goes through an entire vignette, and it's hysterical, except for the fact it's really not, because it's kind of true. But in another example, he points out in the first Spider-Man movie, this scene where Uncle Ben and Peter are in their living room and talking about, being poor. And Uncle Ben says, well, Peter, we may not be rich, but at least we're honest. What a horrible, horrible message for some young boy or girl to take in, right, when they're watching that movie. Because what's the presupposition? What's the premise? If you're honest, you got no hope, buddy. You're going to be poor and struggling all your life. You'll be honest, but you'll be miserable, but you'll be happy being miserable because you'll be poor, but have, the whole thing. But if you are wealthy, well, you certainly aren't honest. You could not have gotten that honestly. You probably had to step on people's toes, and you had to do this and you had to do that. Wow. That's all unconscious, because we take that in, and that goes right into the unconscious. But consciously, we've been brought up with good morals and good ethics, honesty and truthfulness and integrity and this and that. So now you're 25 years old or 30 years old, and you're starting to add a lot of value to the world around you, and you start to see things coming toward you, and the prosperity coming toward you. But there's a problem here. Your conscious is now getting sort of tripped up by your unconscious. It says, well, wait a second. You're making a lot of money. What does that say about you? Have you been honest? Who did you step on to get where you are? What are your friends going to think about you, right? And so forth. So that's tough. And so that leads to not allowing ourselves to receive, whether it's small things or big. And again, it's only once we're conscious of that we're in a position to overcome that.
When you talked a little bit about mentors. So I guess first off, what actually is a mentor? And then how do you go about finding one?
Well, I mean, basically a mentor is someone who guides you along. They have experience in areas that you don't, and have kind of been there, done that, and can help create the environment where you're able to, in a sense, cut years off your learning curve, right? So I think having a mentor or mentors um, is very important. The way we approach a potential mentor can go a long way toward that happening. One mistake I see people make is they will approach someone with whom they a successful person, with whom they don't have a relationship, and just say something like, "Hey, will you be my mentor?" or "I need a mentor," or what have you. And that really doesn't distinguish you from anyone else in a positive way. First, that person probably has a lot of people asking him or her to be their mentor, but the way that the question was framed comes off a little bit almost entitled. It's sort of like saying, "Hey, will you share 30 or 40 years of your life experience with me, even though you don't know me from a hole in the wall," right? And a mentor protege relationship is just that. It's a relationship. It doesn't just necessarily happen any more than you would ask a person out instead of on a first date asking them to marry you. We've all heard that analogy. No, it's a relationship, and it builds over time. Now, you can still ask that person, though. There's nothing wrong with approaching a person, even one you don't know very well, but the way you do it would be kind of different. So what I would suggest is to say it in a way similar to, "I know you are extremely busy, so if this is something you'd rather, you don't have time to do, or for whatever reason would rather not, I'll absolutely understand. I'm wondering if I may ask you one or two very specific questions." Now, what you've done there, three things. One, you have come across in a way that's much more respectful. You realize this is a big ask, and so you're not assuming that they would, right? But they would. Now, number two, you've given them an out or a back door. You've let them know if you don't have the time, or for whatever reason this is very important, because when we give someone that, to the degree we give someone that out, okay, or that back door, that's the degree they don't feel the need to take it, because they know that you're going to honor their time, right? That you already are aware of this, right? That makes them feel so much better. And then the third thing you did, which is so important, is rather than just saying, "Can I pick your brain," which is very general, and again, just kind of signals to them that you really don't know what you want. You're just kind of, in a sense, wasting their time. You've said, "May I ask you one or two very specific questions?" This says to them, okay, this person knows what they're looking to do. They have an agenda. They're not going to waste my time. That right? And so the chances are that they're not always, but usually the person will say, "Sure, absolutely, go. What can I do for you?" Or we'll set a time, or whatever it happens to be. Now, for this session, you want to make sure first that you've researched them so thoroughly that you don't ask them anything that you could have discovered, through that research. But I'm assuming that's not an issue. You want to make sure to not take up a lot of their time, to thank them profusely once the conversation is ending. Let them know that you look forward to applying their wisdom right away. And if you wouldn't mind, may I every so often get back with you and just update you as to how things are going. And they'll say, "Oh, of course, absolutely." Okay, now what I would do right after that conversation's over is write a personalized, handwritten thank you note to them, just a brief one that just says, "Hi, Mr. So-and-so or Ms. So-and-so," or however the relation's been established. "Thank you so much again for taking time out of your busy schedule. Your wisdom is priceless, and I look forward to applying it right away. As mentioned, I'll pop back and update you on how things are going. Again, many thanks. Best regards." Sign your name, put it in a envelope, hand stamp it, not a meter machine stamp, hand stamp it, handwrite, the address, boom, send it out. That right there again is going to distinguish you. I would also make a small donation. Again, doesn't have to be anything big, but a small donation to their favorite charity or cause, which again you can find out online, or at the worst you can ask their admin, but you'll probably find it online. And so, and make a small donation in their name. It'll get back to them, and you're not doing it to kiss up or anything, but again, just to communicate value, to communicate that, while I certainly can't give to you what you're giving to me, I'm thinking about you, and I want to provide value where you believe it's of value. Right now, a few weeks later, you might call him or her, or whatever it happens to be, or send an email, or whatever you do. You might have another question to ask, and again, over time, a mentor protege relationship might develop, or it might not. That might be the only time you're going to speak with that person, but you're going to meet someone else, and now you know the process. You can do the same thing, and you'll find people along the way that that you're able to connect with, and eventually you might meet that one mentor, that one Tuesdays with Maury guy who you talk to, or you might not. It depends. And so, but that's how I would suggest going about it.
Awesome. Well, I want to be cognizant of your time. And before we slowly close out, I do like asking everyone that comes on, what's the best and worst personal finance advice you've either heard or received?
I don't know what the worst financial advice it is, because everybody has their opinions, and probably those are all the worst. I think the best is just have a boring portfolio and grow it steadily. And that's what I've done with my financial advisor. We've been working together for probably 20 years now at the least. And I've got a very boring portfolio. I know just enough about it to be able to talk intelligently, but I don't follow, I don't watch it every day. I just let it grow and let it go. and that's,
Awesome.
and I think that was the best advice I received. Have a boring portfolio.
Awesome. Well, Bob, it's been great having you on. Why don't you give the listeners a handoff? Where can they go learn more about you and buy the books?
Yeah, the best place is burg.com. And if they'd like, they can also subscribe to my free daily impact email. It comes out Monday through Friday. So when you go to the site, there'll be a little annoying pop-up that comes up. So just click on that, and that will take you to it.
Well, awesome. Well, Bob, you've definitely changed my life through this book, and changed a lot of lives. So I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you
Yep.
so very much.
Yep. Take care.